For today's video lecture, we'll be talking about Aaron Nimzovich. This is not, I'm not a specialist at Nimzovich's life. What I can tell you is that there were a lot of concepts that he invented that were very influential in my chess, and I'm going to go ahead and show you, I'm going to show you a game where I could bring these concepts to life. So what was it? What was one of Nimzovich's, one of his, what do you call this, maxims or axioms? Like, I don't know what the proper term is. Nimzovich said that we shouldn't develop, that pawn moves are not developing moves. And when I was becoming a master in chess, or above 2200, that was very influential to me, and I'll show you why. I used to play, let's say I were white here, e4, c5, d4, pawn takes, c3. I would always be playing for the initiative, and I'd sacrifice material to gain more time with my pieces and just to attack the king. And this is how chess was actually played in his time. This was very easily understood. But what happens when you just don't, when there is no attack, right? And then what do most players try to do? Or when they don't understand how to proceed in a game, they just try to keep on attacking as if that's all that could be done. And as we know, there are rules to follow in chess, and that was a big breakthrough for me. How to stop these compulsions from occurring. So let's say if I were white here, I'd make a move like h4. And okay, this move is interesting, but but it's not necessarily the type of move that you want to play. And this could go on from different positions where, let's say, a g4 type of move. I know there are a couple of g4 some of you g4 guys out there, you just want to push g4 and try to win the game like that because you're trying to force things in a chess game. And that's not what's important to realize, is that there are rules to chess, and this is really not how you reach that next level, or how you just play chess in general. So the reason why I'm choosing the game that I chose today is because I saw that it was a perfect example of this concept that he came up with, and or that he expressed in his works of strategy, my system, my praxis, and the blockade. Because in this game, he doesn't win the game by being the more knowledgeable player, but he simply keeps himself from doing things. He doesn't have that bad habit, and he wins the game because of that. Because his opponent, he made all these meaningless pawn moves, and he just ends up being crushed. So okay, Nimzovich was black. He played c6. White played d4, d5, knight c3, pawn takes. So this is a Caro-Kann defense. Everyone knows that. Knight to f6. Typically, the main move here is to play bishop to f5, but Nimzovich was being Nimzovich, so he was being creative. Knight takes f6 and pawn takes. This is a very passive variation for black, because it's very hard to stir up counterplay, and really he's basically waiting to see how white develops his pieces. Now, nonetheless, what we could say is that black exchanged a pair of minor pieces, and his position is very solid. He doesn't have any apparent weaknesses in the game. White played c3, bishop d6, bishop d3, and black castles. Queen to c2. And now in this position, black played a move which I found quite curious, h6. Why do I find this move curious? I find the move curious because a natural move would be rook to e8 check. The reason why I think that maybe 𝐼𝐻 didn't play rook to e8 check was because he might have wanted for white to make the mistake of developing his knight to f3. Here, very natural, knight to e2, right? But in this position, after h6, knight to e2 is not that obvious. White might want to play knight to f3. And the knight has no prospects in this position. Notice that he doesn't have access to this square or to this square. And knight to h4 might not be the best alternative. So maybe he didn't want to play rook to e8 check in that position because of that. So h6, knight to e2. Now he plays queen to c7, preventing white from castling short, also preventing bishop to f4. White plays bishop to e3. And now 𝐼𝐻 plays knight to d7. Okay? And here, white makes a move that's horrific. But it's a type of move that many players would make, especially beginning players. Those the relentless attackers. Queen to d2. And I would categorize this move as a 3 question mark move because it's very ineffective. White is moving his queen once again, so he has to take time to make that move. The threat that he has of capturing the pawn on h6 could be parried very simply. So in essence, queen to d2 has no purpose because the threat could be met. And the idea is to attack the king, but that attack is not going to be successful because you're only playing with a couple of pieces: the bishop on d3, the bishop on e3, and the queen on d2. That is not going to be good. So black played here rook to e8, and now the idea is if bishop takes h6, pawn takes, queen takes, bishop f4, the knight is pinned, and the bishop comes to the rescue towards the king side. Queen h7 check, king e8, f8, queen h8, king e7. Now the rook is threatening to capture the queen. This is completely, white has no compensation here. Okay, so let's go back. White plays knight to g3, which is a fairly logical move. He's bringing pieces towards the king side. That's where he should be playing. Okay, a move that should be considered here, and it's very important to mention, is castle's queen side, because white will be playing on this area of the board, and he's going to want to attack the king here. And in this case, pushing these pawns makes complete sense because all of our pieces are developed. They're harmoniously working together. Our center is very secure, and notice that there are no pieces on the king side for black, and there are these two weaknesses. So we definitely want to play on the king side here, and we want to play in that style that that was keeping me from playing better chess. So rook to e8, he plays knight to g3. And now 𝐼𝐻 makes a very curious move, which is bishop to f4. And I just want to say that whenever you break a principle in chess, it's important, or it's interesting to see how you could have played better and what's the bad thing about the move. And here we're neglecting the rest of our pieces, right? And we're trying to exchange a piece just to take away the stress of having to live with that bishop takes h6 threat. So I think 𝐁𝐵𝐴𝐺 missed knight to b6, and let me show you some interesting tactics here. If knight to e4, how would you play this position? And if I had the Jeopardy music, I would go ahead and I'd play the Jeopardy music. So you're just gonna have to play that tune in your mind. Have a beautiful combination here. The move is rook takes e4. After bishop takes rook, white has f5. The bishop has to move back, not too far, f4. And I would love to play this position. The bishop is trapped, and so queen to d3 is forced. And after pawn takes bishop, it's very hard for me to say who's better, because the position is unclear. If say the king can't castle because of bishop to f5, the rook is protected, threatening rook takes queen, and bishop takes bishop. And if queen takes, then, well, there are many moves here. Bishop to e6 is one move. It's unclear. So this was nonetheless a much better move and principled. And I'm showing it more not because it goes along with what I want to show you in the game about how white has an advantage and he plays all these pawn moves, and his position completely collapses, but because there are a lot of very interesting tactics, and we're reviewing how by doing the better move, black would have had a better opportunity. So knight to e4 loses to rook takes c4, trying to say, okay, the idea of knight b6 is to go knight to d5, and now I take away that square, and I'm also threatening c5. But here, black also has a phenomenal tactical shot. Try to see if you could see the tactic. The move is, drum roll, knight takes c4. After bishop takes c4, black plays f5. And now there's absolutely no way to stop f4. And we gain back our piece, and we freed up our game. And black is doing very well there. You notice that if f4, we simply play bishop takes f4. And if knight to f1, we play bishop takes, knight takes, followed by f4. And the game is over. So the most natural move in that position would be to castle, and then we just play f4. And black is doing perfect there. Okay, so after knight to b6, there's one last move that we should consider. After castle short, we also have this f5 move, threatening f4. And black has created a beautiful, he solved his opening problems. If knight takes pawn, then we have bishop takes, followed by bishop takes h2 check. We've simplified everything. And if bishop takes, then we go bishop takes g3. And this is completely fine. Notice that if pawn takes, we could go knight to c4, and we win a piece. And if pawn takes, we go bishop takes f5, and we're once again winning the game. Okay, so back to our the game. Knight to g3. 𝐁𝐵𝐴𝐺 played bishop to f4, and here white played what's close to being another 3 question mark move, and that's castle short. Because castling long is also very, it makes sense. White wants to play on the king side. After an exchange, we have an open file, and we will want to play in this area of the board. Okay, the center is very strong here. So it's hard for black to open lines or to create threats to counter all the moves that white is going to do on the king side. So let's continue. Okay. Castle's short. Bishop takes c3. Pawn takes. Knight to f8. I think this is a good position to take stock of the position. Where is black's brilliance? Black has a very passive position. He doesn't have active ways of creating counterplay, but he does have a very solid position. And you're going to see as the game develops that all his modest decisions were very wise and they led him to win the game. White, on the other hand, has a beautiful position. He has a very strong center, right? All of his pieces are developed, and he basically is at that point in the game where he starts creating threats, and he wins the game by force. So how does the game continue? In this position, he plays rook to f2. And there's something that should be talked about rook to f2, and that's that when you see a move like rook to f2, what would we say about rook to f2? Okay, the idea is to double the rooks on the f file, but what's the idea of doubling the rooks on the f file? Is it just because it's the only open file? It would probably be because you want to create threats on this structure. I know some very good players that would probably say that rook to f2 is a ridiculous move because rook takes f6 will never work. So that's something for you to think about. So rook to f2, queen to e7, improving the positioning of the queen, threatening the pawn, e4, bishop e6. All very natural moves, and this is black's strategy basically. Now he's going to bring the other rook into the game, and he's going to have a very solid position, but nonetheless very passive. Here white made another 3 triple question mark move, and that's a3, and this is the first of all the pawn moves that he makes that are just horrendous. a3. When I saw a3, I immediately knew that that was a bad move, and the question is, how would you approach a position like this? My first intuition was to play rook a to f1, and after bishop takes a2, because that's the only reason why we would play a3. Otherwise, a3 is completely there's no purpose to us. To it, what I would consider here is to play b4. Now we're attacking the bishop. We're preventing c5, which is black's freeing move. And after something like bishop to e6, a move like knight to h5, this is the most logical way of calculating or interpreting the position without being massively brilliant. Okay, now we see that we're attacking all of these weaknesses. We could open lines at one point. We could bring the queen into the attack. White has the initiative, and black is going to have to defend correctly. Now, being brilliant, there's actually a much better move here, and that's rook takes f6.